And Lou, I'm gonna ask you to start this off. We had our conversation, kind of some backstory here. I was listening when I run. I listen to Planet Money a lot, which is a great NPR podcast. And a couple weeks ago, they did an episode that I finally just listened to this week that was looking at vaccine distribution and the global supply chain. And one of the things that they addressed was getting vaccines where they need to get. And one of the questions is how can this save the airlines, right? Because the bottom line is that the freight airlines aren't going to be able to meet the demand. And there's some kind of built-in structural things that make this good for airlines, right? Lou, fill us in here.
Right. So can vaccine delivery save the airlines? The short answer is no, but the long answer is this is an interesting question. So let's talk about it. A huge part of the challenge of vaccinating the world is getting the vaccine to all corners of the globe. And for that, as you say, we need a lot of airplanes. The International Air Transport Association, which is a trade group, they estimate that over the next 2 years, we will need to transport the equivalent of 8,000 planes loaded with 100,000 tons of vaccines apiece. That's a lot of airplanes. Now, a lot of it is going to fly on dedicated cargo. Some is even going to fly on military, but passenger airlines do carry cargo, and they're going to play a big role. The companies we're talking about are mostly the network carriers, American, United, and Delta, but also Alaska and Hawaiian have a big part to play here as far as domestic goes because they simply go to out of the way places that other transport services don't go to. So is that enough to save the airlines? No, not by a long shot. Because despite what the airline PR is going to tell you, and every one of these companies has put out a really slick video about their part, and as they should, but the vast majority of these shipments will go through FedEx and UPS. They are the ones set up for this. American in particular has good sub-zero storage capabilities, but they just don't have the resources to really do this in bulk. But what we are going to see is it's going to be incremental revenue at a time when airlines desperately need it. And added cargo demand can help justify flights that may be marginal at best in terms of passenger demand. So you can actually get incremental passenger revenue if you're flying planes because of the cargo. And looking at the big picture, if you couple vaccine transport with the biggest e-commerce holiday season in history, anyone with transport capacity is going to have a great few months in their cargo side, and that includes the airlines. If you look ahead to the first quarter of 2021, which is usually the slowest part of the year for both airlines and cargo companies, we're going to see a sizable boost thanks to the vaccine. It's going to be the rare year where there isn't a big dip in the first quarter. And, I think for me, the investing takeaway is more buy the transports, buy FedEx, and not buy the airlines on this because they are the ones that are going to get the bulk of the business, and this is their bread and butter. But again, this is going to help ensure the survival of the airlines as they wait for the customers to actually get the vaccines and start flying again. So it's definitely a step in the right direction.
Yeah, it's just really interesting, right? Because you think about this from the bigger picture. One of the things that they were talking about in Planet Money is like glass, like because these vaccines for the most part have to be kept super duper cold.
Mm.
Most glass, when it's super duper cold, gets really brittle. And
Yeah.
even you might have little microscopic flakes, and nobody wants to get glass injected into their veins, right? So one of the bigger issues is going to be access to enough vials to be able to store it, because it's also the same kind of glass that gets used for things like cancer medications.
Mhm.
You can't just, it's not like you're going to make less martini glasses. You have to keep supplying, life-saving drugs. So the applications, it's weird, all these little bottlenecks that flow through the system. But I did think it was really compelling how there is some potential for this to kind of help the airlines, but it's
Right,
it's
right.
not a
Oh,
thesis builder.
to use the glass analogy, you're fortunate that we haven't seen, say, a spike in cancer at the same time where there's actually more demand on that side. But
Right.
because of the nature of the pandemic and the nature of, we've already talked about the greatest e-commerce year in history, there is actually more cargo demand right now absent the vaccine. So it's coming at a time when where demand is harder to come by. What that means is pricing power, particularly on the non-vaccine stuff, because I don't think FedEx or UPS are going to go to the government and say, hike rates. But on the non-vaccine stuff, which desperately needs to get there by a certain day for holiday season, you are really seeing strong pricing power. And as I say, you're going to have a rare first quarter. Usually the Chinese New Year ruins the first quarter for shipping stocks. Vaccine is going to be very good for them this year. And I think that as an investor, that's when it's really going to be interesting, those first quarter earnings.